Hi, everybody. I'm Bryan Mudd, a fan of South Plains politics. Here's your talking points for this week. You know, we ask our police to protect us, but we don't pay them as much as other cities. Now officers ask the Lubbock Council for more competitive pay.
Lubbock prepares to join the ERCOT grid. I'm Wes Rappaport at the Texas Capitol. Is the rest of the state ready? We'll have that story coming up.
From the studios of KAMC Television in Lubbock, your local election headquarters. This is Talking Points with Bryan Mudd.
Thanks for joining us, everybody. Also this week, the plot thickens. Big votes on big bills as we come to the end of the legislative session in Austin. The budget's locked up. Permitless carry is going to get done. Another one that'll be talked about after the session will be Senate Bill 8, or the Heartbeat Bill. Governor Greg Abbott signed this into law this week. It'll take effect in September. It bans abortions in the state as soon as a fetal heartbeat is detected, which is as early as 6 weeks into the pregnancy. But a reflection of the situation in Lubbock right now is that law will also empower anyone to sue abortion providers. And the state doesn't enforce this, so it's essentially up to you and me. If that sounds familiar, that citizen enforcement in session is almost exactly what's in Lubbock's new abortion ordinance. Supporters say that's what makes this a legal way to stop abortions here. Planned Parenthood and the American Civil Liberties Union of Texas disagree, and they sued the city of Lubbock this week, which is exactly what most everyone thought would happen. And KAMC's Grace Morris looks at that suit.
As soon as the ordinance passed, we knew that we were going to have to challenge it in court.
Planned Parenthood and the ACLU making what many thought possible official.
This is a clear violation of the constitutional right to access abortion for folks in Lubbock.
The lawsuit claims the ordinance violates the constitutional rights of a patient and Texas state law. It requests that the courts find the Lubbock ordinance invalid under both Texas state law and the 14th Amendment.
Without access to the full spectrum of reproductive health care, it becomes much harder for an individual to really be who they want to be.
The ACLU even filing a motion to block the ordinance before it goes into effect on June 1st. But those on the other side of this issue are hoping to get an injunction to prevent abortions from happening while the lawsuit makes its way through the system, saying the ordinance was cleverly written and should stand up in court.
You know, there's plenty of case out there to support the ordinance, the way it's drafted.
The city of Lubbock even issuing a statement saying it will vigorously fight this lawsuit.
We're going to be on the offense, I'm told, and I'm told we have a really good attorney that's extremely familiar with this issue and has had successes in the past. So I'll just wait and see and let it play out. Obviously, you know where I would hope that it ends.
But both sides are firmly planted in their viewpoint, hoping this lawsuit will either change nothing or everything.
We're hoping, obviously, that the law is struck down by the court.
If Lubbock becomes the domino that starts an effect across the country, then it was the right call for sure.
Grace Morris, KAMC News.
All right, Grace, thank you. We have talked to elected officials about all this, the pro-life and the pro-choice folks, but we felt like we needed to let you hear from someone who's a legal expert who has no real skin in the game specifically, so we bring in friend and attorney Jeff Nicholson for some real talk. Thanks for coming and doing this.
Thank you. I don't know what kind of an expert I am, but I think I understand enough about it that to know that it's emotional. I believe that there's a way maybe to go into it to sort of explain to people the nuts and bolts of what's really going on and hopefully kind of let people see exactly how it's working from the mechanical aspects of it.
Planned Parenthood and the ACLU of Texas say that Lubbock's ordinance is bad in two ways. First, under, I guess, the due process clause of the 14th Amendment, does this constitute any sort of undue burden on someone wanting to get an abortion?
It does. It sort of provides we use the term slippery slope, you know, when you're going to law school and things like that. What it does is the Constitution basically says we've got certain rights that are fundamental, and you've got other rights that come under what we call intermediate scrutiny, like gender, age, things like that. And then you have other rights that are just like rational basis type things. And I always akin this to when you deal with abortion, voting, alienage, things like that, those are fundamental things, and they have to pass a strict scrutiny test or people's rights are violated. In other words, so an ordinance that for whatever reason affects some fundamental right or some fundamental guarantee by the Constitution is one thing. On the other side, if a city wants to come in and have an ordinance against people having pit bulls. I think Denver, Colorado, you can't have a pit bull in that town. Well, that's okay because that doesn't affect a fundamental right, and so it's not going to be challenged under what we call that strict scrutiny standard.
And second, I get Lubbock's ordinance, and this is probably the most basic of all of this. It goes against state and federal law, which is what the Olson & Olson law firm warned the city about before this started, right?
Right. What happened, this is what I was thinking of when you asked me to try to put it in layman's terms. Is let's don't talk about abortion. Let's don't talk about people's right to live in a certain area or voting or alien. Let's say you had a federal, let's say that owning a pink car was a fundamental right, okay? And you had the right, fundamentally, under the Constitution, to own a pink car. And let's say we got to a town like Lubbock or something along those lines, and someone came in and goes, I don't like pink cars. We don't like pink. We're a group of people, and we don't like pink cars, so we want an ordinance that says no pink cars in Lubbock. Follow me? Okay. So then this group of people goes to the city council and goes, we don't like pink cars, so let's have an ordinance that says we can't have pink cars. And the city council then says, well, there's a federal law that says you can do that have pink cars, so what we'll do, because you guys are interested in not having pink cars in our town anymore, we'll contact our law firm, we'll have them look into it and decide if our ordinance can withstand the scrutiny of the federal rule that says you can have pink cars in a town. That's the question you ask in a nutshell. They went to the law firm came back and said, look, you guys can pass an ordinance, but it's not going to withstand the scrutiny because a local ordinance cannot usurp a federal law, so it's not going to work.
Let me throw out a couple of things the supporters of the ordinance have said, and you tell me if you think any of this is legally sound. Hey, nobody's telling people they can't get abortions. They just can't get one here in Lubbock. Can Lubbock make that call and use that from a legal standpoint as defense for this?
I don't believe they can. What is going on there is they've passed this ordinance that says we're not saying you can't do it, but you can't do it in Lubbock, and that has a chilling effect on these fundamental rights that are guaranteed to people by way of the Constitution. So you've got this federal law over here that says that you can do this and so on and so forth, and the local ordinance says no. What they're trying to do to usurp this thing, this federal law, is they're saying our ordinance does not say you cannot have one, and we're not going to challenge you legally to have that or put you in jail or any of those things. We're just going to give other people the right to sue you if you do. And that's what they're hoping will get them around this situation where you have a local ordinance conflicting with the federal law.
Now, and you mentioned this, there's no criminal enforcement here. But hey, the feds can't keep me from suing the doctor in an abortion or the person that drove them to the facility. The feds can't make them, they can't keep you from suing them, right?
Theoretically, they can't. Now, I think realistically, nobody's going to do it. I don't know that you would find a plaintiff's attorney in this town that would do it and expose himself to that liability, because once they take on those clients, they have a duty to those clients. Now, in many civil cases, a firm takes it on a contingency. In some situations, a firm can take on a civil matter, but they can require the people to say, okay, we'll do your civil case for you, but you got to fund it. And so, I don't see it realistically happening or whatever. I think that, maybe it could or whatever. But even then, even if they say the state cannot keep you from doing this or whatever, if the Supreme Court were to come in and say, okay, we know what you're trying to do here. We know that you're not legally trying to lock people up and do things this, but you're providing this avenue, then that has a chilling effect on the federal law, and then the feds might address it or whatever. But I don't believe they will. I don't believe the issue here is abortion. The issue is whether or not a local ordinance can usurp a federal law.
All right, let's pause for a moment. We'll continue our conversation with Attorney Jeff Nicholson in just a bit. The Lubbock City Council found themselves really between a rock and a political hard place with the Sanctuary City Ordinance. I'll ask Mr. Nicholson more about the future of this lawsuit, the potential cost for us, and the pros and cons of using a pro bono attorney to represent us. Next on Talking Points.
You're watching Talking Points, a focus on the political scene in Lubbock and across the South Plains.
And welcome back. Here's a look at some of the political headlines of the past week. The next step in the Ports to Plains expansion of I-27 south from Lubbock is off to the governor's office to be signed. It's the formation of an advisory committee that will include either the mayor, city manager, or assistant city manager from Lubbock, among others. They're charged with studying the needs and concerns of folks between here and Laredo and to advise TxDOT on what needs to be done to make this happen. And we found out this week that tornado sirens may be important in Lubbock after all, but there are installation delays now for the 45 sirens approved by the City Council in February. They wanted the project finished by July, but manufacturing and shipping delays have pushed this back. They now hope to have it done by the end of the year. The good news is that it's coming in about $400,000 under budget. And speaking of budgets, Lubbock police officers are asking the city for a pay raise, and they say the money's already there to make it happen. The city budgets for 564 officers, but they only average about 415 or so a year. The Lubbock Professional Police Association says that extra money could put their officers on the same scale as neighboring cities of Midland and Abilene.
Cutting funded positions, pushing that into salaries because that money's been budgeted, and every year when we don't use that, that money goes back to the city. And we started like 65 officers short of the budget number in 2007, and right now, we're about 55 officers short.
Every day, these guys put their lives on the line, every day. And I think the least thing that we can do is support them and try to get them, paid and get them, in a position where that they deserve.
So far, city leaders have not officially responded to the request. One other note about the Planned Parenthood ACLU lawsuit against the city of Lubbock. After the suit was filed, their attorneys also filed a request in U.S. District Court to have the judge issue a preliminary injunction or summary judgment against Lubbock to keep the ordinance from going into effect in June. The city's attorney sent back a response opposing all of that, saying the plaintiff didn't present their request the regular way, and there at least should be some sort of evidentiary hearing to prove why this would be needed in the first place. So as we sit here, the judge has only asked the attorneys for briefs on this. Interesting, though, that the city of Lubbock listed as their attorneys local lawyer Fernando Bustos and partners from the Hacker Stevens firm out of Austin, so no pro bono work here. And let's continue our chat on the legal side of this with attorney Jeff Nicholson for 5 more good minutes. Now, the ordinance supporters say Jonathan Mitchell of Mitchell Law in Austin has agreed to defend Lubbock in the case for free. Tell me about pro bono work. Are there guarantees this person or his team are willing and able to even do this, or the city would be comfortable doing something like this?
I don't think the city would be responsible at all by hiring someone to do this. So it's either doing it for one of two reasons. Either they truly believe in what they're doing and they want to do it, and that's fine or whatever, or they're just saying and doing things for the publicity aspect of it or whatever. But the city, in defending taxpayers like you and I, in defending this lawsuit, has a duty to hire a firm or hire someone or obtain counsel that is capable of doing this against these ACLU and Planned Parenthood lawyers. And I can assure you, like we talked about before we started taping, those kids don't mess around.
No, and that's what they do. Now, but if Lubbock goes away from that, then that's a taxpayer expense.
Correct.
And the Planned Parenthood lawsuit, as it's written, stipulates that if Lubbock loses this, then Lubbock has to pay the opposition attorney's fees and the cost. Is that a normal thing in a case like this?
Yes, especially if the case is deemed to be frivolous.
So how much are they going to charge for this kind of thing?
I don't know, but probably
a lot.
The going rate. Yes, sir. Yeah.
All right, so regardless of the end, it would behoove, though, the people who are part of all of this to get this into the court system and let this go on as far as it can.
It would, but the problem is it's such an emotional deal from both sides that sometimes rational decisions aren't made along those lines. In other words, believe me, there are a lot of people who feel very strongly about pro-life, and that is their right to feel that way. And there are people that feel very strongly about pro-choice, and that is their right as well. And when you get a topic that's this emotional from both sides, especially if attorneys are working free, because there's nothing worse than an attorney-driven lawsuit. But the bottom line is when you get people on both sides like this that are willing to fight, sometimes you don't know when rational thinking is going to take over.
They want this in front of the Supreme Court, or at least maybe the Fifth Circuit, or just get it out there from a larger end. What's the chance of this case moving that far in that direction?
To the Supreme Court?
Yeah.
I think zero.
Because?
Because I think the I believe it'll be handled in the Northern District and affirmed by the Fifth Circuit against the ordinance being something that can usurp the federal law. I don't believe it'll go any further than that. I think that the real issue here, and this is just my opinion, is that I believe that a lot of people in this town have a belief that what they did was vote for or against abortion.
Right.
Or pro-life or pro-choice, and that's not what they did. That's not what this election was about. This election was whether or not a local ordinance can usurp a federal law. That's the issue that will be decided. And I believe that the local, the Durham District of Texas, I believe will strike that down, and if not, I believe the Fifth Circuit will. I do not believe this will go before the Supreme Court. I do believe the matter, I think it's in Mississippi,
yeah,
the 15-week deal. I believe that will get to the Supreme Court, and the reason I believe that is because it's more directly tied into abortion in and of itself. And I know that France and some other countries around the world and things like that have similar laws about 15 weeks and so on and so forth. I also don't believe that the Supreme Court will ever come in and strike down Roe versus Wade. I don't believe they'll do that. What I do believe they do, they may make some modifications. And I think that what happens is people want no gray. They tell you they want gray, but deep down they don't want gray. So rather than just saying pre-viability, post-viability, and then letting individuals and doctors and so on make that decision, they want a fine line. And I don't know if that's right. I don't know if that's correct or not. I don't know.
Man, a lot we don't know about all of this for sure.
Right.
Thankful, though, that we got to hear from Jeff Nicholson, attorney, and we'll call you a legal expert for the choice of this, because what do we know, right?
Well, if you want to talk to me about some of the things that I do all the time, homicides and things like that, I might be able to do a little bit better.
Hey,
but the bottom line is that it's an emotional deal no matter what side you're on, but I don't believe that the Lubbock ordinance in and of itself is about whether there's going to be abortion or not. I believe that that's going to be more decided on whether or not a local ordinance can usurp a federal law. It's going to be interesting.
Attorney Jeff Nicholson. Thanks, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All righty.
And by the way, that Mississippi case will be heard by the Supreme Court this fall, so we'll see. Straight ahead, 1 week until Lubbock changes power grids, what to expect, and what support we're getting from Lubbock representatives in Austin next on Talking Points. At about this time next weekend, most of us will be getting our electric power from the state's ERCOT power grid, and most of us will have the power shut off for about a half hour at some point next weekend when that change takes place. But the folks at LP&L think that other than that, the switch will be relatively painless.
We will work as hard as we can to try to make this as efficient, as quick as possible, and then folks can get on with their lives, and we won't impact them more than necessary. We're going to start on the northeast side of the city, and we're going to work substation by substation making this conversion.
And you can log on to lpnl.com and type in the meter number that's on your bill to see about when your power will be out next weekend. LP&L had 150 miles of new transmission lines built and upgraded substations and meters, but it might not help if the rest of the state's power producers aren't ready for the hot summer and cold winter peaks. A lot of good news, though, that a compromise has been reached now to weatherize some of the state's electrical and natural gas infrastructure and to overhaul the coordinating board. It's not everything, but it is a start, and KMAX West Rappaport has a look at Lubbock's power move from the Capitol perspective.
Inside the ERCOT control room, the team prepares to add thousands of new customers from Lubbock, with the plan nearly a decade in the making finally coming to fruition.
There's an enormous amount of engineering work underway. There are new transmission lines that have been constructed in order to reliably serve the citizens of the city of Lubbock that are moving over into the ERCOT region.
ERCOT's Senior Director of System Planning says the new deal will also bring more generation power from the South Plains and the Panhandle, now painting a rosy picture after the February fiasco.
The new transmission assets are going to be increasing reliability, not just in the region, but also increasing reliability throughout the grid. I don't think there are any specific concerns at all.
Some lawmakers see it the same way. State Rep John Frulo says he's hopeful Lubbock customers won't see a real change.
When we turn that light switch on, we want power, and we want to be able to afford that bill.
At the federal level, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg told me the infrastructure failures showed a need for reform.
We need to recognize that our power infrastructure is critical infrastructure and needs to have real, serious, major federal investment.
One future fear for customers floats to the surface because in the winter storm, Lubbock's power largely stayed on. It's currently on a different system.
What is the biggest worry that you have about this transition process?
Well, my biggest concern is we don't want people to die when their power doesn't go out. And people die from excessive heat, and they die from excessive cold.
Lubbock's state senator, Republican Charles Perry, tells me legislative proposals this session to reform the grid in light of the February freeze will bring reliability back to the Electric Reliability Council of Texas.
We will have done the things regulatory-wise that will hopefully open up the opportunities to do what needs to be done to not guarantee, but minimize the disruptions going forward.
In Austin, Wes Rappaport, KAMC News.
Wes, thank you. We'll be back with the final word. Next week, we start our journey here with ERCOT Power and end our Texas legislative session, at least for now. Full report right here. And hey, send us a comment on our KAMC News Facebook page and at everythinglubbock.com. Click weekly features and talking points to stream this and many of our past shows. And that's all of our time. For all of us on Talking Points, we thank you for watching. We'll see you right here again next week.